The Endless Golf Podcast, brought to you by Toyota.
And welcome into another edition of the Unstuck Golf Podcast presented by Toyota. Joining me today is Paul Salter, and Paul is a mindset and performance coach. And I got to say, first of all, Paul, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy you're here, and I could have used you about 2 years ago.
I hear you. I wish I knew what I knew now 2 weeks ago, but also 10 years ago.
It's pretty amazing. I went through a tough time with the yips, and I think I've turned the corner. I've got myself out of it, and I know you can understand that. And you talk about a mind game. That certainly is a mind game, and it toyed with my mind for a long time. I could not, if I stood over a 2 or 3 foot putt, I had some really, really bad thoughts going through my head.
Yeah, that's a dark, lonely place to be. So I'm happy to hear you have climbed your way out of it.
Well, we're going to get into golf a little bit later on, but I want to talk about your business because you do, not only do you golf, you do a number of different businesses that you're involved with and people, whether it's athletes, business people, etc. You've been doing this for about 15 years. And I guess my first question is, how did you get into something like this?
Yeah, so picture a 16-year-old multi-sport athlete who is all of 5'1" and 100 pounds soaking wet. Because that would be me in high school. And as you can imagine, struggling to keep up with my peers who were all bigger, stronger, and faster. And I will still give my mom all the credit in the world for feeding us healthy food choices. But it was around that time I started to recognize that my work ethic in the gym and what food I put in my body gave me an edge. It helped me keep up with everyone who was bigger, stronger, faster. 2-a-day football practices. I was there at the end beating everybody in sprints despite being half of their size. So I carried that aha moment with me to college. I started recognizing that, hey, I could get paid to do this. So you have to remember, this is at the time, this sounds crazy, where in the entire NFL, for example, there were only 5 full-time professional sports dietitians on staff. Everything else was done by the strength and conditioning coach or the athletic trainer. Nutrition was given no credit at all. And I started to recognize a big opportunity. So I went to school for dietetics and, went and got my graduate degree in exercise and nutrition sciences, and ultimately ended up working right off the bat with collegiate professional and Olympic athletes, helping them to maximize their performance, their body composition, and their recovery through their nutrition, through their supplementation. And what was really neat about that experience was right away, I had a front row seat into the minds of some of the best, whether it be track and field, football, basketball, those who were just different. And I can tell you, being 22, 23, 24 years old, you could feel the difference just with them standing 10 feet, 5 feet next to you. So I got this front row seat of how they went about themselves, how they carried themselves and prepared. That was much different than the rest of the population. And I always had a fascination with the psychology behind why we do what we do, especially when we know it's not good for us. And we can all relate to that in many areas.
Yes.
And as I continued my career, the kind of funny side story I took is I then took a brief period of time seriously pursuing professional poker. And I started to recognize, despite how much I studied, despite having a technical coach to help me with the ins and outs of the game, as the buy-ins and stakes got bigger, despite knowing what to do, I would freeze up. I would intentionally make the wrong decision out of fear. And regardless of how little or how much you know about poker, the one thing I'll tell you is that is a quick way to lose a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I reached out and hired my first mindset and performance coach. And not only did my coach dramatically impact my poker game, but she helped me tremendously in both my professional and personal life, that it inevitably became a natural segue. I love the impact she's had on my life. This marries well with my passion. So I started working toward more schooling, more credentials, more mentorship, left the nutrition behind, and have been headfirst into mindset coaching ever since.
Well, that's a great story, and certainly a great start to your career. And I will say that we were introduced to each other by Brian Taylor. I had him on the podcast, about a month ago, and knowing Brian, and I've known Brian a long, long time, and you've described a lot of what Brian Taylor is all about. He is a grinder. He's just a little bit different. He wrestled in college and became a really good golfer because he committed himself, and he did a lot of the things that you're talking about, specifically with his diet, with his workout. I mean, he's always been that that guy. I mean, I've been on a number of golf trips with him. I was kidding with him. He's on the podcast. We could go out. We'd have a great time. He'd be the guy that'd be up 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning, headed to the gym, getting it done, and then play 18, 27, 36. It didn't matter. So he's that kind of guy you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's just almost like it's hardwired into him. But what a lot of people don't recognize, it is a conscious daily decision he's make with that is ripe in intentionality and diligence every single day. But as you and I both know, he's reaping a tremendous amount of rewards as a result of that commitment.
And just to prove by meeting you, he's always looking to improve himself, both personally and professionally, and obviously on the golf course as well. So he's that kind of guy and a great fit. But you got to make a commitment to some of the things that you're talking about and alluding to. And I know you deal with a lot of business people as well. And talk to me about the business part of it and how you work with and mentor some of the business partners that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to say, to articulate what I do, I help high performers get unstuck and unlock their full potential. So all of us, and it seems maybe a bit strange to say this, but like whether you are the best of the best as a business owner, an entrepreneur, a professional poker player, competitive golfer, as different as each of these particular people are, we're all hardwired the same. So when it comes to the business owner and the entrepreneur, what we ultimately find is that each of these individuals, just like you and I, we have these collections of what I like to call detrimental mindset programs that are instilled in us at a very young age when we don't have the emotional tools or the strength, courage, or ability to form our opinions. So what happens is we begin to learn behaviors to get our childhood needs met. And back then, these behaviors, whether it's perfectionism, procrastination, fearfulness of speaking up, they're all learned behaviors designed by our subconscious mind to keep us safe. The only problem is that fast forward decades later, they are no longer serving us, and more often than not, they are hurting us. So in the business realm, we find that indecision, you and I both know, is incredibly costly. The inability to delegate or lead, to instill a vision, inspire action, all of this is incredibly costly. It's not only costly financially, but emotionally, psychologically, and physically. A lot of the business owners I work with, they pour themselves into their business. They completely neglect their spouse, their children, their own self-care. And it's because they have such strong perfectionistic tendencies, or they don't know how to manage self-care and stress. And a lot of work we do is to uncover the origin of some of these learned behaviors. We work to unblock some of these emotional hangups so that they are able to experience more energy, or we're able to unlearn the beliefs and behaviors and upgrade them with ones that work for them rather than against them.
I guess that's a pretty challenging situation for a lot of business people, particularly the ones in high management or the owners, because, these are people that are type A, they think they know a lot, and they do, obviously, to become successful. So for them to open up their mind, it probably takes you a little time to kind of get through there.
It absolutely does. So one of the concepts I find myself constantly repeating is that, right now it is you and me versus your subconscious mind. But originally, they don't want to be on my team either. They're feeling threatened. There's a lot of resistance that comes up. And that's because these programs have been ingrained and running for decades. So it is definitely a phasic, stepwise process to go deeper and deeper. But eventually, with every session, there's a big emotional release, or there's a sense of clarity or a new perspective that allows them to move forward with more clarity and to let some of these new beliefs and way of doing things slowly but surely sink in.
When people or businesses come to you, do you usually, is it the person who comes to you, or are they recommending that hey, Bobby, you should talk to this guy, he can help you? Is it something like that, or does it the person that usually contacts, hey, I need help, and I think somebody like you can really help me?
So I definitely get a lot of those inquiries, and I'm fortunate enough at this point in my career where I get a lot of word of mouth referrals. And because someone has had a tremendous experience working with me, they want to tell their friends, their family, their coworkers, and that inevitably leads to, just a simple conversation where I get a chance to learn more about them, where and how they're feeling stuck, what their life would look like if they didn't feel stuck. And if it feels like a perfect fit, of course, and I'm 110% confident I can help them, we then move on to having those types of discussions.
Okay, well, Paul, we're going to take a quick break, come back and talk about some golf and how you can help me and others in the game of golf and how you've helped them over the years. So we'll be right back after this, so stay with us.
And now a word from our sponsor.
I love a good adventure, and my friends and family do too. So we all drive Toyotas. Tacomas for my rugged buds, and Corollas for my city crew. And I drive a RAV4 that I take camping, shopping, and basically everywhere else. We all picked our Toyotas because they're reliable and efficient and have amazing resale value, saving us money now and down the road. So we can make every day an adventure. Check out buyatoyota.com for deals and inventory. Toyota, let's go places.
And welcome back to the Endless Golf Podcast presented by Toyota. Joining me today is Paul Salter, and he is a mindset and performance coach. And, you know, when we started out the podcast today, Paul, I said, I wish I would have found you 2 years ago. I mentioned I was going through some dark times with the yips, but, you know, it's kind of funny now that when we get into the game of golf, because, you know, it is a very physical game, but I tell you, the mind in the game of golf, as golfers know, is so important, especially if you play competitively. And I will say that, you know, a lot of the guys on tour now, guys and girls on tour, are getting a mindset and performance coaches just because it means a lot to them and they understand how important it is to their game.
Yeah, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Jack Nicklaus who said the game of golf is 90% mental, 10% technical. Like, yeah, it's all up here, and it's wonderful to ingrain and alter and fine-tune technique all day long. Can you do that on the 18th hole with 50,000 fans staring you down? Or even when you're on the golf course with your buddies, there's a few $100 in beers on the line. Like, how do you show up under pressure, for example? What does your self-talk sound like in these moments? If you can't get out of your own way, you're going to continue to flop day after day.
You know, and I've seen this over the years. I've watched guys and played against guys and with guys that are really good players, but when the heat is on, they're just not the same. And I think we're all a little bit like that. I mean, you know, I love guys that some guys will tell me I've never choked. Well, then you never really played golf, because everybody feels the pressure. Everybody at some point, if they played this game in a competitive situation, has hit a bad shot and they felt the pressure. So I think you have to first acknowledge that it's out there, and then you got to figure out ways to deal with it.
Absolutely. And I always enjoy this aspect, you know, the biggest challenge to conquer, especially if we focus on like men golfers who, you know, at that level tend to be more stubborn, ego driven. They think they know it all. At the end of the day, it's all an emotional related challenge. You think about the anger, the frustration you feel when you make a mistake or hit a poor shot. You think about the sense of failure, disappointment, or shame you might experience if you don't win or perform under pressure. All of these emotions essentially serve as a catalyst for negative self-talk, limiting beliefs, reminders of all the past mistakes you've made or the opportunities you didn't capitalize on. And that's not a good state to hit the best golf shot possible. And the emotional volume of your brain is so loud, you don't perform your best.
You know, it's amazing. And when you're going through tough times on the golf course, you know, I always say this. I said, people will remember how you act, not necessarily how you play. And golf is a game where you try to carry yourself like a gentleman when you're playing. And when you're hitting bad shots, you know, it can be frustrating. But throwing clubs, doing crazy things, screaming, it's not the way to. It's number one, it's not a good look. And number two, it's certainly not helpful.
No, not at all. I mean, today we're filming this during the Masters right now. Jon Rahm went on a massive tirade on 18 yesterday because he too, his frustration was high. His emotions got the best of him. And, you know, golf's an emotional game. We're emotional beings. It's great to feel and have these emotions, but if you cannot temper them and get them out of the driver's seat before your next shot, you're going to open up a really big knocking down of dominoes of bad shot after bad shot.
You know, I have a funny story. Kind of growing up, I played a lot of baseball, and I played for a team in Baltimore called Johnny's. And my coach back then was a guy by the name of a great man, Walter Youse, and he's well known in baseball. And after every game, we would sit in the outfit, and he would just talk to us about different things. And one of the things he said to me that stuck, and I use it in golf to this day, is that, you know, the difference between a pro and an amateur. A pro will you know, a pro baseball player will strike out 3 times. He'll come up in the bottom of the ninth. He'll hit the home run or the base hit to win the game. The amateur will strike out 3 times, and he's still thinking about the 3 times that he struck out, and he'll strike out again. And that's a huge thing with mindset. And in golf, it really is. You have to put that bad shot, that bad putt behind you, and move on to the next shot.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting too. And this, I'll give a little tangible takeaway for the listeners as well here. Like, let's say you're a scratch golfer. You are going to hit 70. You're going to have 72 individual moments of the utmost presence, focus, and intentionality. That in and of itself is taxing physically, emotionally, and mentally. Like, doing it once is draining. So it's truly a skill that you have to cultivate. You can imagine how much more challenging that is if there's emotion still running high from the previous shot. So one thing I do with my golfers is I set a goal that's individualized. We start a little smaller and we work up to whatever they're consistently shooting, but it's throughout the day. I want you to find one, let's just use 72 intentional breaths throughout the day. We breathe thousands of times throughout the day, but the ability to cultivate stillness, intentionality, and presence 72 times in a day is mirroring what you're going to do on the golf course. So it's training the skill of focus to turn down the volume of your emotional brain.
It's pretty amazing. And I tell you, and then when you're playing and you're in those situations, I know when I went through my yips and with the putting, people start to feel uncomfortable for you, and they do feel sorry for you. But you know what? They're also going to take advantage of you. They're going to try to beat you, even if you got the yips or whatever your problem is. One man's fault is another man's gain, and that's kind of the way it is when you're in competition. There's you're out there battling. They're not trying to look after you. That's up to you to figure out how to fix it. And it took me a long time. It's funny, Paul, because there'd be times where I'd be playing and I'd have like a putt that normally would be given, and these guys were looking at the sky. They weren't giving me anything. But I will say there was a point too where I said, I don't want you giving me anything, because the only way I'm going to get out of this is to make it and put it in the hole, to see it go in the hole, to feel it go in the hole. And if you give me putts, it's not going to help me. It's going to hurt me.
1,000%. And that's why, so one of the over or undervalued tools that I have in my toolkit, and every competitive golfer knows this, it's just a matter of whether or not they use it, is the power of visualization. Your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what you're imagining. So when you're stuck in a rut like that, and you can't get on the golf course, or maybe you're just so damn frustrated and sick of being there because it's been such a negative, nasty place for you, that's where some of the mindset techniques and training come into play. Literally taking the time to hear the sound of the ball drop into the back of that cup goes a long way in recreating that in reality.
Well, Paul, it's been great talking to you, and I really appreciate your time. You've helped me just by some of the conversations that we've had. And also, I would recommend, if you're looking for someone, a mindset or a performance coach, whether it's your diet, your mind, your physical, ability, he's a great guy to lean on. Paul, give them your information, how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bobby. So the best way to connect with me will be either on Instagram at Paul Salter Coaching, or to send me an email, paul@unstuckyourselfmindset.com.
I tell you what, that's a great unstuck yourself is a great word. And a guy on tour who used a mind coach was Wyndham Clark, and it changed his game, and you can see the difference in him. So, it's much more, they're much more available now. There's people that are doing this. There's people that are willing to do it, because I think before a lot of people fought it, and now they understand, hey, there's nothing wrong with me. It's good to have another set of eyes and another opinion and someone to talk to all the time.
Yeah, and I'll share one more quick tidbit before we wrap up too. I think it's pertinent to both business owners and golfers. Like, we live in a day and age where you can no longer blame lack of information as your problem. Google will give you the answers in a matter of milliseconds. So we don't struggle with lack of information. We struggle with implementing and taking action on that information. That's where a mindset coach comes into play, to get you out of your own way.
I think Mike Tomlin, the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, said that it's not what you can do, it's what you're willing to do. And I think that's a big part of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Great quote.
All right. Paul Salter, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Until next time here on the Endless Golf Podcast, we'll see you. So long, everybody.
The Endless Golf Podcast has been brought to you by Toyota.